Good to go? Okay, awesome. Well, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee. It is 7:01 and I am calling this meeting to order. We'll do a quick roll call. I'm Tom McCarthy, Chair of the Audit and Finance Committee. Fine, Ray.
I'm Donna Dixon. I'm a trustee and member of the Audit and Finance Committee.
Oh, still muted. There you go.
Ray Goaz, board member, Finance Committee.
Melanie Metzger, interim director.
Adam Stump, budget manager.
Rebecca Delgeza, administrative assistant.
Sean Smith, treasurer.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So first order of business is public comment. Have we received any public comment?
We have not received any public comment for the committee. If anyone from the public wishes to make a public comment, you are asked to send an email to publiccomment@albanypubliclibrary.org or call and leave a voicemail at a monitored account at 518-290-6905. We ask that you leave your name and address to identify yourself, and all public comments will be read during designated times.
Thank you. So our only real order of business today is reviewing the draft budget that has been prepared by the business office. Just for context, so we have to, I guess we don't have to, but we should probably make a motion to recommend a draft budget before our budget meeting, which is the 22nd. So that would be a motion from our committee recommending that we adopt some budget. So maybe we do that today. Maybe we call another meeting to do that next week. And so think about that while we're going through. And also before we leave this meeting, I'd like to come up with a plan as to when our next audit and finance meeting will be. Whether that be before the budget meeting, the full board budget meeting, or after it. So those things we'll talk about before we leave. But in the meantime, to kind of introduce us to the budget and help us understand, Adam, does it make sense if I turn it over to you to give us the rundown?
Yeah, definitely. So I was just planning on sort of running through the budget line by line. So as you can see, we have 4 different proposals here. Because we haven't gone for an increase in 4 years, the maximum tax levy we are allowed to ask for without overriding the tax cap is about a 3.96% increase over the previous budget. So you can see that's the highest increase proposal we've factored in here. We've also included a proposal with no increase, a 1% increase, and a 2% increase. So for the revenue and expense lines, we've used all the same numbers. The only numbers that are different between proposals are the library operation levy figure and then the fund balance usage resulting, as you can see here. And with that, I will just start to go through the revenue lines. So we'll start with the pilot payment. We did just receive our 2021 pilot payment. It was in the amount of just over $480,000. 2 of the last 3 payments we've received have been in that amount. So that is what we've budgeted for here. The New York State grants line, that is the central library funding that we get from UHLS, along with the LLSA funding we get from them. And that's been a steady total over the years, more or less. The federal grant line, that represents our E-rate payment that we get every year. Also has been in the amount of just over $35,000. So the next line I wanted to elaborate on a little bit more, this construction grant line. So I think the tentative plan in dealing with this line and the corresponding grant expense line, since all of our DLD construction projects are, to my knowledge, going to be recorded as capital projects going forward, I think the plan was to sort of treat the treat it similarly to how we treat the branch improvement plan line on a document like this, where we would show the revenue that we get for the DLD projects, and then towards the bottom we would have a line separate from any of the other sections of the budget, perhaps, that would say capital projects. And so that expense line would be the total cost, including the matching funds that we have to pay for. The revenue line would obviously be just the amounts that we get from DLD. So for example, if we plan to get $100,000 in grant funding from DLD one year, that would go in the revenue line. If the total cost of the projects was $175,000, that would go in the expense line. Doing it that way, the problem we were seeing last year was the construction grant expense line in particular was sort of throwing off the section of the budget that it was included with, the occupancy costs section. So by separating it, I think that will clear things up. And then the expenses will continue to be reported in more specifics on the capital reports that are presented at the board meeting every month by the treasurer. So having said that, we have left the construction grant revenue line at 0 for the time being. I don't know that we have any solid indication of the exact amounts that we'll be getting from DLD during 22, 23 at this point. I suspect that during the budget modification, we will edit this line and the corresponding expense line. So moving on to fees and sales, we've kept that flat at about at 15,000. I think that was actually a slight difference from the prior year. We modified it up to 35,000 for the current year due to some sort of one-time occurrences. But typically, I think we're going to expect to see about this much going forward. Interest income, we left at 25,000. That has been a highly variable line over the years. In the current fiscal year, we're actually reporting a loss due to the unrealized losses on our investments having to be included in this. But as more of our investments start to reach maturity, I do suspect we will see some gains in this line. I believe back in 2019, we actually recorded over 100,000 in this line. So it does vary pretty significantly year to year. So moving on to rent income, that's pretty straightforward. That just represents the income we get from ACAP and CDTA every month, and that has remained steady over the last couple of years. So we'll touch on the fund balance usage later. We'll move on to expenditures now. So starting with payroll, we've gone with a full-time salary budget here of 3.75 million and a part-time salary budget of 675,000. So that is an increase over the current year salary budgets, both the original approved budget and the modified budget. It does not represent what we would consider a fully staffed APL. It is a good bit less than what we would budget for if we were able to fill every position that we wanted to fill and could count on those positions being filled throughout the year.
Just to clarify, did you pick this number because we don't think that we can fill all the positions, or does this number represent us making a sacrifice?
Potentially a combination of both. These figures are fairly conservative and sort of planned for in the event that we weren't to receive a tax increase. I guess I will move back up to the fund balances here. So if we did not receive an increase and we had to count on using almost $600,000 fund balance, these salaries, we could work with that. I mean, I don't know that it's ideal that we use this much fund balance, but it's not so significant that we wanted to avoid, I think, presenting a proposal that would have to utilize a much more significant portion of the fund balance, like perhaps even over $1 million. So we definitely wanted to avoid that. And so these numbers seem to be an increase over the previous year's salaries, but also not our ideal number. So I think we would certainly be able to maintain our current level of staffing with these numbers. As far as filling every one of our vacancies, adding new positions.
As we have mentioned numerous times, we are not adequately staffed. There's many positions that we actually need to create in order to get our buildings staffed at the appropriate level that they should be, where we're not feeling the crunch of people calling in sick and having to potentially close branches. We have been in situations over the last several years where we haven't had all positions filled at all times. We've had numerous vacancies on any given year. So this calculation, as Adam said, it's taking into account that there's most likely going to be an increase for the executive director salary, the potential raises because we are going into a contract negotiation year. So there will be, a potential raise for our current individuals on staff. But this is not counting. I think this is, as he said, we were being a little bit conservative because we're realizing that we are in a rough hiring phase where it's been difficult to hire people. So we probably will still have a couple of our positions remain vacant throughout the next 12 months. Or 15 months or so, and then not adding any positions. So we had the intent on adding some additional positions to bring us up to where we needed to be, and we kind of scaled back on that to keep these where they are right now.
So when you say conservative, you mean that this number is a low end estimate of what we could spend on payroll?
I would suggest that if we were to receive the maximum tax increase, I think there would be room later in the fiscal year during a budget modification to increase these salary figures perhaps higher. So when people increase part-time hours, take steps like that and bring these salaries a bit closer to a level where we would consider ourselves fully staffed.
Okay, Donna?
Yes, many of my questions were answered in Melanie's remarks. Are the positions that are being left unfilled professional positions? Are they, or?
We have positions across the board.
Okay.
We have, I know, facilities, paraprofessional, professional, and administration staff that we have openings in. So I believe currently we have 10 positions open. Right now. And those are no new positions. Those are just straight vacancies.
And that's across the board in terms of function.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
Okay, so moving on to the retirement system line, that is based on the official estimated invoice that we were provided by the retirement system. Fortunately, that is a pretty significant decrease from our last annual payment, over 100,000. So that was a bit of a relief to see that estimated invoice come through. The payroll taxes processing fees line, most of that is based directly on the salaries figures. Our FICA expense is 7.65% of salaries. So that figure represents that amount plus an extra 25,000 for payroll processing fees. Moving on to employee benefits, the majority of that is, of course, health insurance. We have used this number we did use it this year and last year, and we did not hit that number. I don't know that we'll hit that this year either. So perhaps this could be a bit optimistic, but based on our HRA usage trends and the not overwhelming increase in insurance costs that we saw this past year, I think we could safely keep it at this level. Of course, if the trends change unexpectedly, then that would be a line that would potentially be addressed during a budget modification.
And just for those who may not be familiar with our healthcare benefits, we do a reimbursement for over the deductible on our health insurance. So once our employees hit a deductible, the library covers some of those fees. So it depends totally on usage. So if we have a year where people are extremely healthy, we don't use that money, but we budget for it just in case, because there is the potential for people to use it. And that's where Adam was mentioning that we aren't expecting to utilize it all this year, because that's what we're on track to do. So that's why it's stated in that manner.
Question. That I didn't know that about the deductible reimbursement, and that's really wonderful. I didn't know that was being done at all. And I'm wondering if that, have you seen, an ease in being able to hire because of that additional benefit?
Hard to say.
Yeah, maybe ease is not the right word, but has it been attractive? I would think it would be.
It usually, unfortunately, it doesn't usually come into play until after the person's offered the position and their health insurance has gone through. It's usually not something that's strictly advertised, although a lot of people in the region do know that we do that. So
okay, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the next section here. So we did leave North Albany services at 19.2. That assumes that we will be paying the $1,600 a month that we were paying before North Albany closed. Sorry. Of course, that could change. I don't know that anything formal has been established with North Albany, although my understanding is that we expect it to be open during the 22-23 year. So we're leaving that as is for now. Utilities, we've set at $215. We did up that to $235 in this past modification. I don't know if we're going to quite hit that. The rates have been very high this fiscal year. It's difficult to predict how much higher they'll go the following year. And I think this is a realistic estimate, though, based on what we're seeing right now. So the building repair maintenance lines and the maintenance service contract lines, we did bump those up. Those have been believe service contracts was at 185 for this year. We did bump up building repair to 200 during this last modification. I will say, as a caveat with these lines, we are in discussions with one of our primary contractors discussing our service agreement with them for the 22-23 year. It may or may not result in a net increase in costs. It may result in an increased contract cost, but potentially less repair costs. We're still working out the numbers on that. We didn't want to adjust these too significantly without getting more information from them. So I'm not sure if that will be something that gets addressed before February 22nd, or if that's something that we just deal with during a modification. But under our current contracts and current repair expectations, I think this is a realistic number to use for each line.
And I want to just, because this was one that we've been going back and forth on significantly internally with the discussions. It's the new Medisys system that was installed last year, the control system for our HVAC. We were under their basic contract with it. The product is still new, so there's been a lot of call-ins to get it adjusted to where it needs to be as any like new automated system that happens to go through. So our repair costs this year were quite high because all of those calls to adjust the system were considered repair calls because we were only on the basic system. So that's why, you know, if we went to this new contract with them, this new service contract, it would raise that maintenance service contract line up, because we would now not be at the basic level, but we'd be at a slightly higher level. But then we would expect the building repair maintenance line to come down because we wouldn't be paying for those calls. It would be part of the maintenance contract that we had with them. So but we're going back and forth because it's still a gamble, because we're hoping, you know, in the next couple months, once the system is static and stable, that won't be needed anyway. But you never know how the systems are. In addition, we are hitting the 12 to 15 year mark on all of our buildings with their HVAC systems. And that's usually around the time that you see significant repair costs, because parts wear out after that many years and such. So we're trying to, you know, like having a car that's 12 years old, you know, it's your good old standby, but are you going to, you know, bank on the fact that it's not going to need a new transmission? And it's a similar situation with the HVAC system. So that's what we're just trying to balance. Which one do we think is going to be more realistic in the long run for the next year?
Are we still moving forward with the HVAC DLD project? And does that factor into this?
It does. That's one of the things that's factoring into it is, you know, more adjustments will have to be made because that will be brought up to the new system. And so that's kind of where we are with our thinking on that yes, if we keep it under the basic, yes, we're getting in the new system, but it will also require that interim period of adjusting it to make sure it's working at its proper efficiency. And if we're still under the basic contract, those extra calls to get the adjustments made will add to the repair costs. But if we go with the maintenance contract, those repair costs would be covered under the contract.
Hmm.
So.
Okay.
It's
Thanks.
a risk, and we're trying to mitigate that risk as much as possible.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. So moving on to custodial supplies, we did not increase that. I will say with that line, we did have to spend quite a bit more on custodial supplies, particularly PPE in 2020. And one thing I will say that I'm hopeful for, at least for the 22-23 budget, is that we get a reimbursement from FEMA for much of the PPE that we purchased in 2020. Last I heard from them, we should expect to get a full reimbursement or close to it of what we spent in 2020. The timing of that payment has yet to be determined, but I'm hopeful that we see it in the next year or so. And that would be, it would be over $50,000. So it would be a nice unexpected piece of revenue to factor in here.
And just literally that is we've been told that we will be reimbursed, but in the same breath they said, but we don't know when we'll be able to get that payment to you. So it is exactly what it said. We don't know. It could come tomorrow. It could come in a year from now. It could come in 2 years from now. We just don't know when that payment will be made.
So vehicle maintenance, we left flat at 8,000. We have actually been seeing some slight increases in that line recently. Nothing too significant, but a slight increase to that line might be something that gets discussed during the budget modification. Then we have the grant expense line, which I explained earlier. We may be eliminating that language and moving it to a different part of this document and just calling it a capital project expense, something to that effect. And again, if there anyone wants clarification on that, we can discuss that later. Furniture building improvements, we left at 50,000. We did reduce that in the previous budget, but we restored it to what it was at previously. Discussing this line with the facilities manager, he felt that this would be needed to restore it back to 50,000.
Once again, it's the buildings are hitting that wear and tear year mark. And we've already, I know before the pandemic, we were starting to have to reupholster some of the furniture. And so we're expecting to have to do that again.
Okay. Okay. And so that yeah, so you think we upped it in the modified budget. So, and you think we'll spend even more than that next year?
So I actually have the prior year budgets here on the spreadsheet. So we had initially reduced it. We cut it in half. The prior years it was set at 50,000. These are actually the actual amounts from 19 and 2021. So for 21-22, we initially set it at 25,000. We upped it to 35,000 in modification. And for this budget, we decided to restore it to what it was at in 2021, which was 50,000.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
So moving on to materials and services, we didn't make too many significant changes here. We kept the book budget fairly static. We did add a couple of thousand to it. Periodicals has remained static at 52. The central library numbers, those correspond directly with the figures related to our New York State grant revenue from UHLS. You can see those figures on UHLS's website. It's laid out in detail there. Digital content, we set at 70,000. Let's see, I believe we upped it in the modification to 71. It was at 66 initially. So talking to the head of CMS, this was what was requested. And I would also like to add just in general that this budget was created, particularly these departmental portions of the budget, they were created collaboratively with the department heads. And we try to get input from everyone involved in managing and spending these budgets. So a lot of this was created with their input, and I'd just like to acknowledge that. So moving on to programming, we did increase that slightly. It was at 70,000 in the modified budget, 75,000 in the original budget. We did put that back up to 79.
And I do want to make the comment, with the digital content, the books, and programming, generally, things do increase in price. So, we are seeing just, your typical annual increases in things. Digital content, we are under contract with Upper Hudson we have a set amount of digital material that we have to purchase as part of our agreement with Upper Hudson. That's above the central book aid. Every library is required to purchase a set amount of digital content. So that number is where it's at because for that reason, and with a notion that our digital circulation has increased over the years. And we aren't seeing the decrease that we thought we would see once we get opened back up. We think people have shifted their reading habits. And so we are still seeing that uptick or that at least plateauing of the digital usage of materials. Programming, and then you'll see it's also it's going to affect our publicity and printing lines. We do want to make it known that next year, 2023, is our centennial for the library. We're celebrating our 100 years. And so there are a couple lines that we did give a little bit of cushion for because we do know that we will be doing some extra programming. We'll be doing some extra publicity and materials for the celebration. And so we're working along with the Friends and Foundation, but we do see that we will probably have a little bit of outlay costs, probably a logo for it. And we're going to hopefully get community backing for that because you only get to celebrate a 100-year anniversary every 100 years. So it's kind of a one-off, celebration, but we do want to celebrate it because we think that is vital and shows how much the community cares for the library that we are celebrating our 100 years. So
that's good to know.
That is so exciting.
it is.
That'll be fun.
Really excited. We're trying to temper it because we understand where we are financially.
Yeah.
But we do have some ideas, and we thankfully have a lot of community support. So we are seeing some people who are willing to help monetarily support that as well.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, Melanie. So moving on to the next section here. A lot of these top lines we kept fairly static. Office and library supplies, a lot of that ends up being paper and toner. And that's a line we can sort of keep an eye on and pull back on if necessary. So we kept that, I believe we kept that flat. Yep, it was a 55. Bank fees is set at 6,000. Sean and I are actually meeting with our bank rep tomorrow in an effort to make some changes to our account structures to reduce bank fees. Hopefully we see a little bit of a decrease there. I also just wanted to mention that bank fees, it's not just fees from our bank, it's also, we get charged fees for every credit card transaction that we process at our registers. So that ends up being a fair portion of the total budget there. So just calling it bank fees, it is slightly misleading. It's also credit card processing fees. So memberships, postage, both fairly minor lines. We did actually reduce postage by 1,000. the PR line, publicity line, as Melanie said, so that was one we had also cut in the previous budget, cut it down to 20,000 and then again to 10,000 in the modification. So we have upped that back to 40,000. And as Melanie was saying, the Centennial does have that is going to make it significant in that line.
And we are hoping to return back, because if you remember, we used to do a very nice program guide that was quite substantial, and we've scaled back on that due to the pandemic. And we are hoping to, if not get it back to where it was, to get it closer to where it was too. And that does, since it was a full color printing, that does add to the cost of that.
Yeah, I used to like that guide a lot, actually.
Yeah.
It was every other month, right?
Yeah, we used to do it. It used to be quarterly, and then we shifted it to every other month because we are actually doing so much. So
Okay, so training, we actually did add a couple thousand to that as well. It was at 15,000 for this year. Community relations, we left flat at 5,000. The professional services line, so we did reduce that slightly to 160. I believe it was at 175, both in the approved budget and the modification for this year.
So just real quick on that.
Yeah.
Actually, first on the community relations line, what is that?
So that line, I'm trying to think of some specific sort of expenses that get booked there. To be honest, it hasn't been used all that often in the last years. So, I'd like to be able to look at my records in the office to get you a better, some more details on.
yeah, I was just gonna say it's stuff like when we do purchase for, like, when a board member leaves, or if there's a chamber event that we've been requested to present at, and there's a fee to attend the luncheon or anything, things of that nature get covered under the community relations.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. And then on professional services, we budgeted 175 last year, and that I think we did that because it's supposed to cover our contract renewal, like our union
Negotiation, yeah.
renewal. Yeah.
We're
So-
hoping that some of that conversation will be able to start in this fiscal year. We're hoping that, we can potentially start that in a couple months. Where it's one of those conversations we're having in the back. Do we wait for the new executive director, or because technically the contract runs out at the end of June, so we would want something in place by July. So we're, in which case it would be covered under this year's budget. Because the budget we're talking about would start in July. So that's why we're hoping that we can bring that number down. Is there the potential for it to come up a little bit? Yes. And we would have to do a budget modification for that, but we're hoping that we would be able to handle the contract negotiations prior to this budget.
Okay, Donna.
Sure, just to clarify, so I make sure I understand what's in that line. That is the library's contribution to CSEA?
No, that's our attorney.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought.
Attorney, like anytime we have a
Yeah.
consultant come in.
Oh, okay, sorry. When you said contract negotiation, my mind just went somewhere else, and that's exactly what I thought it was, is what you said it is.
Sorry.
So, okay, thank you. I was like, wow, okay. And
It's not just legal, it's also like,
right.
the strategic planning consultant that we.
Yep,
bring in
yep,
more
yep, yep, yep.
for-
Okay, that's exactly what I thought it was, and I just took myself to a different place. And just to comment on community relations, another example that I can give that I'm sure it cost a little bit to do was the library had a booth at Snug Day, which I was at with the health department, and it was really nice to see the library there, and they did get a lot of traffic at that booth, so it's always good to see, that presence in the community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, anytime there's like one of the fairs, and they do, even with nonprofits, they do charge.
Yeah.
So it's anytime we're out in the community doing something community related. goes
Yeah.
under that.
Okay.
thanks.
I would also just add too with the professional services line, one of the more significant charges that gets assigned there every year is our auditors. That does make up a pretty good chunk of that. So moving on to tax cert payments, the 100,000, that was an amount that was recommended to us by Bob, our legal counsel, when we first started having to make these payments. In years past, we've had to go a little bit over 100, but I don't know that they're not the amounts of the invoices are not steady enough where I think we necessarily need to raise this budget significantly at this point. Probably something better dealt with during a modification. So moving on to the ULON fees, those are remaining steady at just under 59,000. And liability insurance, that was bumped up from 70,000 primarily due to our cyber insurance going up by a few $1,000s. The hope is that some of the steps we're taking as a result of seeing this plan premium increase the way it did, we'll be able to bring that down again, hopefully by the few $1,000s that it increased. So again, that may be, until we get more information on what that might look like, we felt it was safest to leave it at 75,000. Did you have a question, Donna?
Nope, okay.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to IT. We did actually, discussing this with the IT manager, we kept services static at right around 160. It was just slightly over that in this past budget. And then with software, we did increase it slightly from about 40,000 to 45. We did reduce hardware to 65 from 75 and 90 before that. Melanie, I don't know if you can articulate a bit of the more detail about what the IT plan is as far as
So with
the hardware and software line specifically.
So definitely. So we're our IT manager has been taking a real hard look at our current setups and everything. We're noticing that there's some duplication in software, in that, like, we have, say, we have like scheduling software and the payroll software, where there's a potential that we could utilize one program if we got the right program in place. So we're realizing that there's the potential for savings for software. We're also looking into potentially shifting over to Microsoft 365 as a platform. Right now, Google is our backbone for what we do for emails, for file sharing and stuff like that. If we do that move over, there's an initial outlay cost, but the savings would be, there's much more built into that we wouldn't have to purchase as a side. So that would be savings there as well. And then we have moved off of our Citrix backbone for our public computers, which was allowing, so we're going more cloud-based, and that's giving us potential savings because that's the servers aren't needed as to be as robust. We don't need as we had a dual backup with the servers, and we'll only need the one backup now because we won't need the extra Citrix backup. And with hardware, we were able to bring that down a little bit because most of the purchases are being done this year. When we closed, we had the intent that we were going to move to a completely Chromebook environment when we opened back up. That was not working as well as we thought. So we did have those purchased. We're going to kind of a hybrid model now. So we're doing the Chromebooks and the desktop units. And then when we kind of started reinstalling the desktops, the ones we had were about 10 years old, were way out of warranty, and they weren't starting back up after their hiatus of being down. So we had to do some purchasing of new equipment, which in some sense, you know, it's kind of interesting, even though the technology is increasing, the price for a lot of it's coming down. I mean, what you can buy nowadays for a computer is a lot cheaper than what you could buy 5 years ago, and you're getting a stronger computer. So it kind of worked out to our advantage that we're going to most likely be able to replace almost all of the computers that we need to replace in this year's budget. And then we had it planned for a 3-year replacement schedule with 2 years off. So it would be every 5 years, things would get replaced with a 2-year hiatus. And our hiatus will end up being next year with some of these. So we were able to see some potential savings with hardware there as well. But the services are more of our contracts are the backbone, fiber, network, and broadband. Until internet prices come down, which we don't see that coming down anytime soon, those aren't going anywhere. So that's why we did bump up those, because if nothing else, you know, like everything else, there's inflation on those costs. So those we have seen either stay the same or slightly increase, and that's why this services line is where it is. But we were able to find savings in the other two lines.
So that covers it. I mean, we have the debt service expense line, of course, and then you add that to the operations expenditures lines, and you come out with 10.2 million. So going back to the fund balance usage. So, I mean, I'll just say, I think my sort of informal goal was to keep the fund balance usage with a 0% increase, fairly close to what we went with for the budget modification of almost 600,000. It's a lot higher than we budgeted for in recent years. If you go back several more years, then you can find some budgets where we did budget for more than that as far as the fund balance usage, but I think we feel it's safer to keep that fund balance usage in a 250 to maybe 400 range. And so these are the 4 options we've come up with. Of course, we can set any percentage increase from 0 to 3.96. It doesn't necessarily have to be 1, 2, and 3.96. So that's that. If anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to ask.
Go ahead.
Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Donna.
You're still muted.
I was making so much sense too. So I'm sure you have this already, Adam. And so if we could have this either, you know, off the cuff tonight or for our next meeting, what the average increase per $1,000 assessed value is for each of those options?
Thank you. I don't think that's the one thing.
You know, I meant to ask you before the meeting and I completely forgot to send an email for that.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I have that.
Okay. Well, I guess my next question is for Tom and Jeray, and everyone here. Do we want to, because I need to just kind of digest this, and that is a figure that I would like to have before I can think about what my recommendation, or preference would be. If we can, get that information for the next meeting, which I think will have to take place before the 22nd meeting, correct? So that we can make a recommendation.
So I totally agree. I don't want to take any vote until we know that number. But I was also thinking of this, and this might not be the best thing to do, but I'm going to throw it out there just in case it is. In theory, we don't have to approve the budget at the February meeting. We could wait until the March meeting. So
The March meeting's the latest one you want to do, so we can get it on the.
Yeah. So
ballot.
would it be possible, Melanie, for us to go into the February 22nd budget meeting without a recommendation from the committee and just take the draft budget unapproved by the committee, talk about it with the full board, and then meet again after and incorporate any changes that the full board wants to make, and then make our recommendation and vote in March?
You could definitely do that. I mean, this is, if you don't remember, like, was it 3 years ago? This is has only been the last 2 or 3 years that we've had these secondary February meetings. So that is perfectly acceptable for you to do something of that nature. It just usually means that there could be the potential for a long meeting, because the discussions could go very long for the budget discussions during the March meeting. So just, that on top of everything else that would get discussed during that meeting, it just makes the potential. That's why we had the secondary February meeting, is just to kind of shorten the meeting length, because I believe one of the meetings we went almost 4 hours. It was quite a long meeting.
Couldn't we still accomplish that by talking the budget all the way through at the February meeting?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But I just want to always, like, because if you're not presenting something or recommendation that you guys are putting forth, that the board is usually looking for that. So if you're extending the conversation over the course of past that meeting and making your recommendation at the March meeting, there's the potential for more discussion. I mean, once again, it's a potential. It could be nothing. Everybody could say, hey, that looks absolutely awesome, and nothing has to be discussed, but there could also be. So it's completely up to you guys.
Okay, that's good to know. Before we talk more about that, I did just want to ask one more question on the budget itself. So our modified budget is 10.39 million, and this budget is actually a little less, right? 10.2 something. Where are the differences? Like the biggest chunks?
So a major difference is the construction grant lines. As you can see here, 160,000 revenue in that line for the modification, 129 in the expense. Beyond that, there's not too many huge changes. I mean, part-time salaries was reduced. The retirement system expense was reduced.
And just so you're aware, like, if you looked at past budgets and how they were approved, I believe last year was the first year we separated out full-time and part-time salaries. Before they were just salaries together.
Mhm.
And so if you're comparing to past budget years, there's a potential that you would see that
Okay.
as a change.
No, I like seeing them broken out.
It helps us when we're trying to do this hiring for part-time individuals, so we know exactly how much we can hire for. I do want to impress upon everybody that we haven't gone for a budget increase since the 2019 budget. So, you know, we're even though we did have the pilot payments, did help to offset that. We are getting into the point, I mean, just like I said, cost of living increases, you know, utility increases and whatnot. It's going to be very difficult to not go for a budget increase again this year. I think that the question really is, how much do we go? And I think this is because of how we're doing our fiscal years now. It gives us a much better, it gives us a clearer expectation of the tax cap. So we know, like, that's been iffy before because our calculations always were offset with the calendar year. And that's not how we collect the taxes. So this is, I think, the first budget we've really had a really clear idea of what the tax cap would be, and we can go up to that 3.96% without having to do a vote on to override.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, I mean, the other thing we can do is we could, in theory, like, I'm not saying we should do this, but I just want to point out that, like, if we or the board wanted to, at some point, we could like mix and match the fund balance with the tax levies. So, like, if there was a budget line we wanted to increase, we could use, you know, the fund balance that's currently listed in the 1% column and move it to the 2% column. You know what I mean? If we had to increase other budget lines, depending on what the full board, you know, wants to discuss on February 22nd.
So if there were proposed increases in expenditures.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to throw it out there so that, just for context. So I guess we have to decide. Yeah, I guess we don't really want to make a motion at this meeting until we know the tax in real dollars, which is fine. So we have to decide then whether we want to meet again before February 22nd, or if we don't feel the need to meet. And I'm comfortable with either one.
I am as well. I have good availability before the 22nd. Jerry, I don't know where you're at.
I'm comfortable with whatever everyone wants to do as well. So, I mean, it seems a factor. Do we really just want to hear what the full board has to say before we go ahead and recommend something? Or, I mean, because that's really going to determine what we're going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We really want to get the feedback from the full board first before we make a recommendation, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're under no obligation to adopt the recommendation. If we want to make changes, you know, that's simple enough to just not take that vote.
But I mean, I think I'm hearing like everybody kind of maybe wanting to see what the full board has to say. Is that what we're leaning more towards?
Oh, definitely. I just want to have that number of what the proposed increase would be for each of these levels per $1,000 of assessed value before I can even think about it anymore.
Well,
Because
absolutely. And with that information, I'm just saying it seems kind of that we're leaning toward, we want to maybe discuss it overall with the full board, even once we get that information, is what I was saying. Because if that's
yeah,
the
I
case,
just, yeah,
before the February 22nd meeting, that's all I'm saying.
I would like to have that information in advance of the 22nd meeting. Yes.
Well, yes, have them from, so I guess maybe you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. So yes, we want the information regardless, right? We're gonna get that regardless, no matter what. So that's, not debatable. I'm saying in reference to us making a recommendation where we really want to incorporate or hear feedback or discuss it with the board first before us as a committee is making a recommendation. It sounds like what I'm hearing. Maybe that's not, we're waiting for the numbers as well. So that's going to happen anyway. I'm just saying, is that what we're leaning towards? Because if we're leaning towards that, we don't need to have another meeting again until after we digest what the full board has to say after the 22nd meeting. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah.
Can we do that? Or do we have to have that information presented within another public meeting? I guess that's my question.
I think the answer is yes, but I think what Jare and I are saying would accomplish that. So like we would go into the February 22nd meeting with no official recommendation from this committee, but we've reviewed the budget, etc. And then after the meeting on the 22nd, this committee would meet again, make our recommendation that incorporates the full board's, incorporates what we talk about on February 22nd. And then we vote in March.
Okay.
So we would still have a full board meeting and a committee meeting before we adopt the budget.
Okay.
and just to be clear, we're essentially as a unit deciding this because of the increase, right? In reference to, we want more feedback from the full board because essentially of the increase, right?
What the percentage of the increase that you would want to go for, should you choose to do an increase?
I just want to make sure the reason why we're all on the same page in reference to the reason why we're going to the full board, as opposed to making a recommendation now, because I'm sure we're going to be asked why we didn't make a recommendation here and then present it to the board, as opposed to going to the board for discussion to incorporate their feedback to make a recommendation. That's all I'm saying. So I want that to be, everybody be on the same page. Why are we going before we get there? Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, we haven't gone for an increase in a couple of years, and I think this is a big decision, and we're gonna spend some of our savings and ask for a tax increase. So I think, yeah, I think that's a good reason to talk to the full board about. But there's also other things, right? The board might have some other suggestions that in the rest of the budget that are also fair game for the 22nd meeting too.
Yep, agreed.
But yes, Jare, I agree. Yeah.
Just making sure we're on the same page here. So, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I mean, I can send an email to the full board passing along this draft budget, making it clear that we didn't make a recommendation just because we have a lot to talk about, and we might as well do that before we make a recommendation. And I'd like to send them the real dollar numbers
Yes.
as well, and that would include for me what the actual tax is right now. So like how much total tax people pay per $100,000 or $150,000, I forget which we use now. And also like I know your regular property taxes are different if you're a business or a residential property. I don't know if I should know, but I actually don't know if we have a different rate for commercial properties. So stuff like that would be great to know.
I think it's the assessed value per $1,000 or per $100,000. I don't believe it's separated out by commercial or residential. I believe
Okay.
it's the same. The only thing it's any property that falls under the pilot payments are taxed separately. We get that as a separate pilot payment.
Yeah.
Right. And what we've done in previous years, in my previous term of service, was have a figure that was for the average property that is assessed at $150,000, let's say, or whatever number we want to pick. This means your taxes will go up X dollars.
Yeah, exactly. So Adam, do you think it'll take a long time to get those numbers? Like, should I hold off on sending this email until then?
I mean, I'm gonna try and work on getting that together as soon as possible. Melanie, I don't know if that's something we can discuss tomorrow morning, even try to get that together.
Yeah, we'll be working on this tomorrow and hopefully can get you an answer by the end of the week.
Okay.
Hopefully. This is my first time doing this, so I don't know how easy it is to get these numbers. So
Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll send this email without those numbers, and then I'll follow up when we get those numbers, just to give the boards a heads up. So I'll send this document that we discussed in the public agenda today, and just let the board know that it's informational and conversation to be continued. Does that sound okay to everybody?
definitely.
All right. Awesome. And then as far as scheduling our next meeting, which will be after February 22nd, since we're all here, do we want to just try to pick it right now? Or I see you nodding from our fearless scheduler. So
I will give everybody a heads up. I'm planning on taking, after the 22nd, I'm planning on taking the rest of the week off. It is spring break week and I have children, so.
fair.
Good.
Okay, so let's look at the week of the 28th. I'm Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the evenings are good for me that week.
I can
And
do
also-
Tuesday or Wednesday, but not Monday.
Okay.
I'm looking at the end of the week, Thursday, Friday. I know nobody likes to do meetings on Fridays, but actually that week, Thursday, I guess would be the only day that would be good for me on that week. After that, then I would be able to do, when is the next meeting?
The next
Is the
board
eighth-
that
is-
would be the 8th.
So yeah,
We also have Monday, the 7th.
what if we do the 7th? Would the 7th work for everybody?
I can't. I work every Monday night.
Okay.
And I'd like to have a little bit more time in between. I'd like to give the staff also a little bit more time in between our meeting and the board meeting, which is on the 8th.
So is Thursday possible at all? What are we?
Thursday, the 3rd?
No, Thursday. Yeah, Thursday the 3rd.
Yeah.
Is that possible for people?
It's not ideal for me, but I could do it. We just have to do it late, like 7:30.
Okay. Are people up for that, or is that too late for people?
Would Friday be better?
Yeah, I can do
don't mind doing it
Friday.
on Friday.
I don't want to keep staff on a Friday after work. Like I don't want to impose that on everybody else, but
We appreciate that, but I think this is one of those conversations that we would understand. Yep.
Nice.
okay. Yeah, and I mean, I don't anticipate it being too
Schedule.
long.
What was Wednesday scheduled for everybody? Did everybody say for Wednesday?
I'm open.
I'm open to
Like late or?
anytime.
Anytime.
Okay.
Do 7?
So then would like, okay, so would 7:30 work for Wednesday for
The
everyone?
second?
The second, yeah, because I'll be back. I should be back by late afternoon, so I'll probably be able to make the 7:30. 7 is kind of pushing it, so I think 7:30 if that's okay with everybody. I mean, I don't know what everybody's.
It's fine. It's fine with me.
Okay, what about everybody else?
Works for me. I'm wide open these next few weeks, so anytime.
Okay.
I can handle it, Rebecca.
Okay, great. Let's do that then.
So
And there's
7:30
also
on Wednesday, February 2nd.
March
March
2nd.
2nd.
I'm sorry, March 2nd. I'm looking at the March 2nd, but
Yep.
half March. Okay.
So March 2nd, 7:30.
Yep.
So,
Right?
we will have the budget that was just proposed will be in board docs under the new meeting date in board docs. And as soon as the requested information is received, that will also be attached in board docs.
Right.
Legally, the committee is not allowed to discuss the information, but once it's in board docs, if you're logged in, you can review it. And it'll be public 3 days before the meeting. So it is a public, for transparency, but you just can't discuss it outside of the meeting. No question. You can ask maybe questions if you want more information from Adam or something, but
Yeah, in fact, we recommend that
We
if
have
there's
a
something that
quiz.
you see that you would like us to have, make sure we have the answer ready to go for the meetings, we can
Right.
definitely do that.
Okay.
any more
Thank
numbers?
you very much.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, hopefully it won't be the longest meeting, right? Because we'll have our big discussion with the full board, and if all goes relatively smoothly, we can just have the changes incorporated and take a vote. Yeah, so 7:30 on March 2nd sounds good. Thank you guys for organizing that. And I think, does anyone else have anything else we need to discuss before I ask for an adjournment?
I think so.
I mean, I just think when we do go to the full board, I think we did a lot of the legwork here, so we don't really need to rehash too much unless it's a question asked, for the sake of saving time. I know sometimes we can get into these board meetings and it's like going over everything all over again from square one. But I mean, if we could, trim the fat wherever we could, just to expedite it, I think that would be great. So, let's not get into any prolonged conversation with anybody because, we know how it can go. So that's all.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I think in past years, board members expect kind of what we did in this meeting, a line by line rundown of the numbers and why we picked those numbers. And then kind of like we did today, just if people have questions, we pause and we talk more about where the questions are.
Long meeting again. I'll try to be very detailed in the minutes to go over a lot of these explanations, and please encourage your colleagues to read the minutes because it could answer a lot of the questions. I'll even have Adam look at the minutes this time and really try to help me add detail. It's a good way to.
yeah, that would be great.
Super. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Yep, thank
Okay,
you.
awesome. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
Okay.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all very much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you guys for all the work on this budget.
Yes.
Looks
Yes,
good.
Adam is
And
better
thanks to
say
all the
their-
department heads and everyone who contributed to it. It's much appreciated.
Definitely.
Kudos. Have a good night, guys.